Hello and welcome to Dialogue. European Council President Charles Michel has announced his decision to run for member of European Parliament in June. If elected, he would immediately step down as European Council President the following month, leaving the position vacant and the EU leaders scrambling to fill it. What's behind Michel's resignation? What will be the impact on EU policymaking, and who could be the successor? Join us for our discussion today, live from Beijing. I'm Xu Qinduo. Joining me today are Professor Jing Men, Director of the Center for European Studies at East China Normal University, Ulrich Brueckner, Professor of Political Science at Stanford University in Berlin, and Fraser Cameron, Senior Advisor from European Policy Center in Brussels. Welcome to Dialogue. Professor Jing Men, I will start with you. When you heard of this news, what's your initial reaction? Is it a surprise for you?
No, it's not a surprise to me.
So,
because for Charles Michel, yes, can I continue?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Because for Charles Michel, the coming election, the European election in June this year, is a very important occasion or opportunity for him to continue his political career. But if he continues to serve as the European Council President till November, he will miss this window opportunity.
All right. Professor Brueckner, do you agree? Is it a surprise to you? Do you think for Michel, the position of MEP is more important than finishing the term of the president at the European Council?
Well, it's not exactly a question whether I'm surprised or not, because I don't have
sorry, we have a connection issue. Let's turn to Mr. Cameron. The same question to you. So what do you think are the factors behind the consideration for the decision?
Well, it's always personal factors. I mean, he's a very important player still in Belgian internal politics. And I think this was the opportunity to ensure that he made a comeback into the national political scene. He did consult all the member states before taking this decision, and they said, yes, we will manage to cope even if you leave early. So I think everyone, although it was a surprise to many people in the public, I think senior officials knew this was coming, so it wasn't a surprise to the elite in Brussels.
So, Mr. Cameron, you speak of the European Council. Tell us how important is the European Council? What's its function? Of course, how important is the position of European President here?
Well, much depends on the personality. This is only the third president of the European Council we've had. The first one was also a Belgian, Herman van Rompuy, who had a very sort of low-key profile, and his term in office was dominated by the Euro crisis. Then we had Donald Tusk, the Polish Prime Minister, who also had to deal with various issues like migration, and he worked very closely with Angela Merkel. Charles Michel is, I would think, not quite in the same category as these two. The role is essentially of a chairman of the board, so he can't take many independent decisions. And unfortunately, Charles Michel did not have a very good working relationship with the president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, so there's always been some tension there. So I think in terms of his overall role, competent, but not exactly very exciting or very sort of progressive.
Professor Jing Men, of course, his departure or upcoming departure is about this upcoming election in the European Parliament in June. Tell us how significant is the election? We have been seeing, report of the, let's say, the populists on the hard right. They are gaining influence in several countries in the European Union. So is that a concern for a lot of people in the EU?
Well, compared to the previous European Parliament elections, one of the important changes in the coming election will be the rise of the right-wing political groups in the European Parliament. Because in the European Parliament, the European People's Party, the Progressive Alliance of Socialists and Democrats, together with Renew Europe, used to be the three largest political groups. But anticipated that in the coming election, the right-wing political groups, including Identity and Democracy and European conservatives and Democrats, will rise significantly in number of MEPs from the current 127 to increase around to around 170. So that will be a very big change in the coming composition of the MEPs, and which will have a crucial impact on the decision making after the European election.
Mm-hmm. So, Mr. Cameron, how do you look at the controversy surrounding Michel's resignation? A lot of people, and some people criticize him for his decision and calling that decision as irresponsible because there are only a few months left. But at the same time, of course, he said, his decision or announcement of his decision leaves enough time for the EU nations to appoint a successor. What's your opinion on that? Seems we lost Mr. Cameron here. Professor Jing Men, how
Yes.
controversial is the decision here?
You mean Charles Michel will leave?
Right. Yeah, because
Yes.
people criticize him. Why are you doing this? People say this is very irresponsible to leave the post vacant there.
From his personal development point of view, I think it's both rational and reasonable. As I said just now, that it's a golden opportunity or window opportunity for him to continue his political career and political ambition, because if he continues till November, he will probably not be able to go back to Belgian politics or to European politics. But if he participates, he runs as a candidate for the European Parliament member in June this year, he may probably be elected as a member of the European Parliament, or even possible that he can probably join the European Commission as a commissioner, or even going further to other bigger opportunities at the EU level. And his father is a very famous Belgian politician, Louis Michel. He used to be Belgian foreign minister, and then he served 2 terms at the European Commission as European Commissioner. And then from 2009 to 2019, his father served as MEP in the European Parliament before he retired. So I think his father inspires his political career, his political ambition. Maybe he would like to follow his father's political path. Now, he had been Prime Minister of Belgium, and when he was in 2014 the Belgian Prime Minister, he had created a record because he was the youngest Belgian Prime Minister in history of Belgium. And then, luckily enough for him to be elected as the European Council President, from 2019 till now, he served 2 terms. And so to go to the European Parliament might be an ideal choice for him. Why not?
Mm-hmm. To continue the political career, of course. And then, of course, if it's a personal decision, but the decision was made at a time, when the European Union is facing multiple crises, let's say, on the domestic front and also in Ukraine and also the Middle East, the Gaza conflict over there. So that's probably, people would say, there's a need of leadership at this point of time. That's why people are a bit critical of his decision. So tell us more about the challenges, facing by the European Union.
It's still me?
Yes, Professor Men, go ahead. Yeah.
Yes. All right. Well, I would say whether Charles Michel is there or not, he will not change the history of European Union development. He will not change the history of European integration, because I would not say he is a very important leader in the European Union, because the European Union has so many different institutions, and for each institution there is a leader. And also different from a member state, European Union is an, let's say, a regional organization. And the president of the European Council is not really a leader in the same sense as a member state, as, for example, France or Germany or the United States or China, because he doesn't really have the real power as the president, because inside the European Union, let's say European Council, as a president, he is there to chair the summit meetings, to set together political guidelines and priorities for the European Union with the heads of state or government of all the member states. And he himself is not able to make any crucial decision, but only on the consensus with all the other, heads of state of or government of the member states. So therefore, I would not say that this is such an important position. It's more symbolic, more institutional than more powerful as a president of the European Council.
Mm-hmm. Professor Brueckner, so in your opinion, what's the impact of Michel's, say, earlier than expected resignation here?
Well, I don't see a major impact because the European Union happily existed until 2009 without EU.
It seems like we still have a connection issue with Professor Brueckner. So, Mr. Cameron, you earlier mentioned about his more or less tense relationship with say European Council President van der Leyen. So like how in what sense that will affect or that would have affected his work?
Well, she, for example, was able to take the initiative quite early on into the biggest issues facing the European Union. Firstly, in the pandemic, it was Ursula von der Leyen who got together the various pharmaceutical companies and produced the inoculation scheme for the whole European Union. And secondly, in the Ukraine crisis, it was again von der Leyen who drummed up the money and ensured the defense support for Ukraine. So I think overall people would say that von der Leyen has played a far more influential role over the last few years than Charles Michel. The institutions are different. As the previous speaker said, Michel is chairing, if you like, the highest board of the European Union, whereas von der Leyen has executive power to actually, and a huge budget to actually go ahead and take decisions and do things. So that's the difference.
Mm-hmm. Okay, there's a difference between the two institutions as well as the two posts. So, Mr. Cameron, of course, like the timing, as we talked about these so-called challenges, facing the European Union, domestically and externally, and of course, what's next? When he resigned, is there a clear procedure? Who will be his successor, and what will happen?
Well, usually what happens a couple of months before the deadline, there's a horse trading that goes on between the political groups and between the member states in terms of who will get the jobs. And they're always parceled out between the main political groups. In the last few years, the top position has gone to somebody from the Christian Democrats. The president of the Commission has also been from the right of centre. And the High Representative dealing with foreign policy has been a socialist. So that's been the mix for the last few years. This may change because the European Parliament will, I think, change after June. There'll be more extreme right-wing, and it'll be more difficult to get a majority coalition together. But ultimately, in terms of these appointments, the real players are France and Germany. And this is what happened last time round, when it was essentially Macron who chose Ursula von der Leyen as president, even though the European Parliament wanted Manfred Weber, one of the leaders of the political groups. So when it comes to the crunch, it is the leading member states, and particularly in Berlin and Paris, that call the shots.
Mm-hmm. So, of course, related to that question, Professor Jing Men, is that, recently there's a piece in the British magazine, The Economist, says, saying that, who is in charge of Europe? Of course, there's an interesting summary, basically. Here I quote, the East is up, Germany is down, Britain is out. that's basically, the challenge of like who is really in charge of the European Union, not only on the level of European Council, European Commission, but of course the real power in terms of the national leadership. So since Merkel is not there anymore, which country or which leaders have the real control in terms of the policies, in terms of the directions of the community?
Well, I think it's a very difficult question because it's very difficult to say who is the one to control the whole process of European integration or European internal or external policies, because it's such a big regional organization and the decision-making process is so complicated. As I said just now, no single person is so powerful to change the trajectory. But on the other hand, in history, we know that there are some very influential figures. For example, Jacques Delors, who recently passed away, he played a very crucial role in promoting European economic integration in the 1980s. But right now, I would say that it's a very difficult moment for the European Union. We can hardly find any leader from the member states to say that the destiny of the European Union would be in the hands of these people. But on the other hand, I belong to the group who are optimistic about the future of the European Union, because since the 21st century, the EU has been going from one crisis to another. But with this institutional construction, I would say even if there is no strong leadership in the European Union, the collective leadership, the institutional power building is very important for this European Union. The current, I would say, the leadership of all the member states, of all the EU institutions to work together to find out what the EU will further evolve. For example, there are some important policies ongoing in the discussion or in the process of development related to migration policy, related to the economic and monetary union, related to the future of the European Union. There are a lot of policies, a lot of discussions, a lot of opinions ongoing in the exchanges between the member states leaders, between the leaders of the European institutions. And that's why I think, although the decision-making process right now is so complicated, it takes time, finally the EU will be able to find its way for further development.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's have a short break. We'll be back right after this.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
welcome back. We have Professor Brueckner on the phone. So Professor, if no successor is found to Michel, that would mean the Hungary's Prime Minister, Viktor Orban, would temporarily assume the position as the country is due to take over the rotating presidency of the 27-member group from July 1st. But of course, if you look at the reports, the reaction, there are many concerns from European leaders, at least some countries' leaders. They are not in favor of Mr. Orban being the president of the European Council. Tell us why and what's the concern? How big a concern are they?
Well, as my Chinese colleague pointed out, the European Union doesn't personalize power in a comparable way with presidential systems. They call this position a president, but it's a very functional, limited form of power. So it will not be the end of the world if for a few months someone will chair a meeting that used to be chaired by someone like Charles Michel. The concerns stem from the fact that there's an ongoing dispute between Viktor Orban, who uses his veto power to blackmail the European Union over and over again, and his different understanding of what the values and the principles of European integration are. And this heated up, and we had a number of disputes over the future of European integration and democratic backsliding and the use of funding from the European Union. So a lot of people would be unhappy from a symbolic point of view to see him sitting in the driver's seat and to not only represent Hungary as the country holding the presidency in the second half of this year, but also chairing the position as a replacement for Charles Michel. But as I said before, this is not the end of the world, and it would even need just simple majority to change the procedure if someone else will step in and take the role of Charles Michel until all the new positions will be nominated.
Mm-hmm. So as earlier discussed, Professor, people would say, this is a symbolic, important post, but symbolic. As a chair of the European Council, we organize heads of state, heads of governments to discuss national policies for the European Union. I mean, if let's assume Orban becoming the president of the European Council, I mean, how big a thing that will be? How big the damage there will be to the European Union in terms of a policy, for example, policy on the Ukraine issue, assistance to Ukraine, or the integration of the European Union?
Well, as Fraser Cameron already pointed out, this is a position in which, first and foremost, Charles Michel is chairing the meetings of the European Council. And this is not a power position in the sense of setting an agenda or even implementing decisions of the European Union. It is important that this important institution, the Concilium, has a president, but he's not the one who guides the European Union into a future or could cause a drama. This is not the situation. The European Union constructed a complicated equilibrium of an interinstitutional collaboration. The Council represents the states. The European Commission represents the supranational perspective of what is good for the whole thing, and they try to balance the conflicting positions. He is just one player in a combination of different institutions, and the EU can easily live with this interregnum, whoever takes the position.
Well, Mr. Fraser Cameron, we mentioned this piece carried by The Economist. There's a summary, basically, I quote here, the East is up, Germany is down, Britain is out. Of course, Britain, Brexit is out of the European Union. Germany is down, they refer to basically, Merkel is out, and the current, the leader is not as powerful in terms of influence as she was in the European Union. The East is up because of the Ukraine conflict. Obviously, East European countries like Poland and other Baltic countries, they are speaking louder. They are having more influence. So tell us, what's the decision-making process? And now which country or which leaders they are more influential in terms of the policies, important policies on the Ukraine issue and the Middle East integration, etc.?
Well, it depends very much on the issue. I mean, on Ukraine, I wouldn't say that Germany was down. Germany has actually played a very leading role in terms of Ukraine, and Germany has provided more assistance of all kinds to Ukraine than any other member state, and second only to the United States in terms of supplying aid to Ukraine. So even though Scholz is not the same sort of kind of influential person that Merkel was in the European scene, he's still playing a rather quiet, but, I think quite a decent role there. Macron has taken the lead on other issues. So it very much depends on whether it's an international issue, in which case you would normally find Paris and Berlin taking the lead. As regards the Middle East, it's been a very difficult issue for the European Union because the member states have been divided as to how far they should go in criticizing Israel. Some of them have very long history because of historical issues in terms of how they approach Israel. So it's always been a problem area for the European Union to achieve a consensus. It's more easy to achieve a consensus on issues like climate change or sort of debt reduction, and even more recently, as someone mentioned, on migration. So when it comes to the hard conflict issues, that's where the EU finds it more difficult to find a consensus. But the point is, it depends very much on each individual issue, which leaders come to the fore and then drive the European agenda forward.
Well, with that as in mind, Mr. Cameron, who are the likely candidates to succeed Mr. Michel?
Well, at this stage, it's quite difficult to come up with any particular name. I mean, if you think back to the last time, nobody thought Ursula von der Leyen would become president of the Commission, not even herself, and she was the last-minute choice. Usually the other choices have emerged as a result of horse trading. The chair of the European Council, president of the European Council, normally is a former head of state or government. That's what has been the case in the past. The European Commission president has been, again, someone who served in a national government. They have to achieve a consensus. And at the moment, you could think of names like Frederiksen from Denmark, Mark Rutte from Holland, Meloni from Italy. So it's still a bit too early. There's several months to go before a decision will be reached. But certainly, there will be no interregnum. There will be leadership in the European Union. You can count on that.
So, Professor Men, basically, the challenges will remain unchanged during the process of selecting or appointing new, someone new to replace Mr. Michel there.
Pardon?
So the challenges, I mean, either outside challenges or internal challenges will remain unchanged for the, let's say, new leader, a new president of the European Council. Is that the case?
Well, the challenges remain. No matter who will be there, he or she will have to handle these challenges.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Cameron. Thank you, Professor Men. With that, we come to the end of today's show. Again, a big thank you to our guests. You can also find us on the CGTN app on YouTube. I'm Xu Qinduo. Thanks for being with us. See you next time.